Hello everyone. I do apologize for the slight delay in starting stream today. I had to very quickly take a call from someone, and I might have to do it again. But sometimes real life stuff gets in the way. Unforgivable, unfollowing. That's fair. That's fair, Lancelot. I should just graduate. And end my streaming career. I was 2 minutes late to a stream one day. It's time to end it. I'm gonna go walk into that river over there, and you guys won't ever see me again. Okay, there I go. Is anyone? Hang on, wait. I have to make myself smaller. There I go. I'm going. I'm going to the river. I'm going to the river. Any of you guys gonna stop me? Keep Mini Ruadh with us. I'll stand here. No, it's cold by the river. I want to be by the fire. Okay, let me. Way darker than you anticipated. I was very tiny. I have the ability to control my size at will. Hi, clever. Crespian, keep Mini Ruadh with us. You guys will be safe in Cozy Ruadh's hands over there. I need more emote slots to get comfy Ruadh. Because I can make an animated version of him, but it looks silly because then he's moving. He's meant to be comfy. Don't you dare, I will hunt you. No, I sound scary, Impeach Claire. Please, don't hunt me. Although I'd be dead, so I'd be getting haunted by a ghost while dead. Well, I wouldn't necessarily be dead, I'd just disappear into the river. It'd be one day till Labor Day. That'd be. But I hope you're all doing very, very well. We're coming to the end of our weekend, and I hope you guys had a very, very nice one. I don't think I've mentioned it, and admittedly I haven't had anything planned for it. I didn't have anything planned for it. But it is, it is coming up to my birthday soon. My, Chua birthday. And, next week. What day will that be, actually? It will be this Sunday next week. We might even, I don't know, I might be busy that day specifically, so I might have to do another day for a birthday stream celebration, but I don't really have anything planned. I don't know what to do. And now Twitch has decided to come down hard on music related stuff. I can't do like a karaoke. I don't even think I can sing Happy Birthday. I think I'd be singing it to myself, so that would be kind of sad. But like that's probably under copyright now, and now Twitch is like if you like hum a song, they're gonna get your ass. They're gonna sue you. No, they're not gonna do that. But they recently signed a deal with some copyright companies and music labels, and it is pretty shitty. I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty shitty level of stuff. One of my friends, Diamandus, we raided into him last stream. He did an 80-song karaoke that's still up on his YouTube channel. You guys can go check it out. But he did an 80-song karaoke stream. I don't know how long that took him, but good lord, he is impressive. He is very, very impressive. I love Daya. He's great. But I had a nice chilled out Sunday. I helped some people. I walked a dog. Very cute dog too. Family dog. Brought him for a nice long walk. And of course I petted him a lot. He's the type of dog, he does it with a lot of people, but he does it especially loud with me. I think it's because I give him, whenever he sees me, it's usually just me giving scratches and walks and food. So like he just associates me with good things, but when I walk in, he'll start whining. He'll start being like but much more higher pitched and loud. And he'll like run around and get all excited and start running between my legs, and like he might run out and grab a ball, or then he'll drop the ball and he'll run into the bed, and he'll jump up and like stare at me, and then he'll hop down and run over to me again, and like, oh, it's so cute. It's very, very cute. He's very he likes me, I think. Or again, he just associates me with good things, so he's happy with that. Other than that, did anything particular happen? Dog friend, yeah. I have another dog friend that does similar. He's a bit of a smaller dog, and what he does is when I'm out for walks, I'll sometimes see him. He's a neighbour's dog. Beautiful coat, but very soft to pet. Nice and thick, like thick and soft. And you just run your hand through it. It's lovely. But he'll do the same, where he'll kind of whine a little bit when he comes over to me, and he'll lie down on my feet, like on top of my feet. He'll put his head on top of my foot, and the rest of his body on the other foot, and he'll just kind of sit there while I rub him. And then when I go to move, he'll kind of be like, but I have to leave, because I can't just stay there all my life petting him. As nice as that would be, I can't do that. They can smell good, people. I would hope so. I hope that's what it is, that they smell the goodness in me. Other than that, no. Not much else. Not much else. But yeah. I might try and think up of something for a birthday stream. Maybe like a day or two after, or maybe might have to be either the Saturday before or the weekend after, because, you know, it depends on timing or something of what I'm doing that weekend, because I could be quite busy. But yeah, I might try and do something special. I just don't know what to do now that I don't have karaoke as an option. Maybe I just do a just chatting stream, and like no one shows up and no one chats with me, so I just talk to myself for like 5 hours. Maybe I can do something in Discord or something, where I'll do like a little Discord party. That could be fun. But today what we are going to be doing is we're going to be getting back into the book that we've been reading for the past couple of days, Medieval Ireland by Claire Downham. We're a good bit into the book. We're not halfway yet. I have a feeling this book, how many streams could it take to finish this? Because there's a whole nother part, and we're kind of just coming near the end of the first part. It's quite a long book, I have to say. We have 2 more streams, I would imagine, on the first part, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe another 5 streams. This is the 4th stream, so ideally 6 streams, because I'd hate to have... Well, 9. Finishing on 9 isn't too bad. Like 1 to 9, that's okay. But I'd probably prefer to do 10. Like, I'd rather have a nice round, like, 10th stream as the finale for the reading. Although, wait a minute, I do actually have to do the first chapter in a bit, too. So maybe I do that as like a... sort of an addendum, a little addendum adding the very start of the book. But this last stream, what we focused a lot on was local histories, specifically around Munster, Ulster, the northern and southern O'Neill, who were the primary people, a little bit on the rise of Brian Boru, Connacht, mainly led by the Connachta, and all of their various families. We looked at, and we can actually pull up that map. So we had all these different groups of people, mainly looking at the Kinneal Conneal, what were the families down in the southern O'Neill, I can't remember. The Aegonacht, the rise of the Dalcaish, particularly of Brian Boru, as well as the Vikings and kind of their introduction and kind of position within Ireland. There was a lot in there, a lot, and I feel like you could watch that stream and listen to that reading, and I could read that particular section of that book for 4 or 5 times, and there would still be things that I would struggle to remember. And that's because there was so many names, so many different people. But I feel like the book did a really great job of being like, here was the major people of this family, of this tribal group, or this side, not tribal group or family, mainly dynasty, of this particular dynastic branch. Here was the moments of ascendancy and fall, and really the 500s to 1100s. What you see is the rise of the Unail and the decline of them, leading up to the rise of Brian Boru and the Dalkesh, and then a somewhat ascendance back of the Unail, and facing kind of stiffer resistance, however, as the provinces kind of consolidate their power, and the lower Tuatha, the Tuatha Ri, or Ri Tuatha, I should say, lose their power, and they become more embroiled with larger scale dynastic attempts to achieve high kingship. This chapter is going to deal with something potentially a little bit controversial, but I don't know what the book could talk about. But it's going to be talking about religion. And the very first topic is called Christianization. So if I had to imagine, it's probably going to deal with, obviously, the Christianization of Ireland, Christianity's place and the replacement of what were pagan beliefs, the introduction of the priestly class, this kind of new scholarly, the rise of monasteries, maybe a unique insight into the way the monastery system worked, all of the different saints and monks that spread out from Ireland. It may touch on, because the book mainly is focusing on the island, so it will probably mention a few places where like Irish monks went to, but it probably won't dwell too heavily on it. It'll probably also look at Ireland's place within the wider Catholic community, because there was a point where it's kind of seen that, you know, Ireland was on the fringes. It wasn't really a part of the church. Like, it had Christianity, but it was like more pagan. Not really. What sort of happened, to my knowledge, is something known as, well, it wasn't known as, but it was insular Celtic Catholicism. And it just had various, you know, there were certain holdovers. There was certain holdovers from pre-Christian Ireland, cultural artifacts, such as the multiple wives, that did hold over for a long time, and was a bit of a point of contention. As we looked at in the law tracts, there was apparently 9 different types of relationships that could be considered. Are we talking about Oisin meeting St. Patrick yet? No, not yet. I don't know if it will touch on this, because this is not dealing with mythology, but I wouldn't be surprised if it touches on it, because I do think that's a very interesting way that the pagan mythology and the pagan religions become intermingled and intertwined with Christian scholarship and Christian kind of influence. And that's probably another thing that we're going to be seeing, like, how does Christianity influence it, right? I think it's very fun. I think it's a fun story. That it's just like, you know, rather than him dying, he meets St. Patrick and Oisin tells the story of the Nafina of Fionn McCool, and that's how these stories got passed down. It got written down, because it was the monks who ended up writing down these stories. Now, of course, some of it was probably looking at it through a Christian lens, almost definitely looking at it through a Christian lens. There's a particular story that talks about, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was basically, I think it was, they inversed what was a common theme, the sovereign goddess, the female goddess that kind of appears before the king of a country or of a province or of a tua, and sleeps with him, and that kind of is embellic. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. emblematic, symbolic, I think is the word, not, I don't know what word I was going for there. Symbolic of not just the people, emblematic, that's the word, emblematic. Thank you, Crespian. I just could not remember how to say it. Of the, not just the people, but also the land, accepting his sovereignty, his authority over that area. But what ends up happening in one of the stories anyway is it sort of reverses this, and it has that sovereign goddess talk about the rise and the coming of Jesus Christ and of Christianity to Ireland. I'd need to dive into my book Ireland's Immortals to pick up which one that was again, but it was really interesting seeing the way they sort of subverted and inverted this common theme for Christian, kind of a Christian use. But I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to getting into it. So, we start chapter 5, Religion, 500 to 1100 AD. Preconceptions of early Irish churches have been greatly influenced by romantic notions of otherness. Ireland's place on the margins of Europe has led its early church to be regarded as separate from the mainstream, with greater continuity with pagan traditions and possessing a less worldly outlook than the church in other lands. Such stereotypes can only be maintained through a very selective and partial reading of the primary sources. A contrary view can be put forward that Irish churches were greatly concerned with orthodoxy, and they maintained strong and meaningful links with churches abroad. And there's a lot of stuff with Irish monks and scholars basically arguing with the Catholic Church on certain things. I believe the dating of Easter was a particular one. Ecclesiastical institutions were not staffed solely by ascetic recluses, but there was an all-embracing model of church organization in which pastoral care and the administration of temporalities were fundamental aspects of ecclesiastical life. While churches aspired to be gateways to the other world, their everyday concerns were always to be firmly anchored in the social, political, and economic realities of the world around them. Christianization. St. Patrick was an important figure in the conversion of Ireland. However, Ireland was not entirely pagan when he began his mission. Nor was the work of conversion completed when he died. So yeah, there was the very first bishop of Ireland, actually, was Palladius. He didn't really, he's evidence of there existing a Christian community, possibly brought over as slaves from England when they were already Christian. But Patrick comes along and he's obviously a lot more successful. The role of Patrick's predecessor Palladius was acknowledged but also downplayed by later writers. In the late 7th century, Tirchán claimed that Palladius was martyred, while Mircho asserted that he had abandoned his mission. The truth is not known, but writers who championed St. Patrick were keen not to let Palladius's reputation interfere with the glory of their patron. Patrick's Confessio referred to the religious enthusiasm of his converts, but it does not say much about the foundation of churches. Patrick also described the ongoing dangers of his mission in a land that was largely heathen. There are medieval stories concerning those who continued the work of conversion immediately after St. Patrick. The names of Secundinus and Auxilius, whose missions were linked with Dunshaughlin, County Meath, and Killashee, County Kildare, may be translated as second and auxiliary. This combination of names hints at intervention. Irish chronicles preserve contemporary records of events from the late 6th century. By that time, the church had made significant headway in Ireland. Nevertheless, the process of conversion and Christianization was complex and long-term. Our earliest sources reflect a society in transition between spiritual worlds. Older belief systems coexisted with Christianity for a long time, both in Ireland and elsewhere in Europe. Early texts witnessed the struggle of Christianity for spiritual dominance. The First Synod of St. Patrick, which may be dated to the 6th century, prohibits Christians from swearing oaths before soothsayers in the manner of pagans, and exhorts Christians to take disputes to a church rather than a judge, and not to receive alms from a pagan. The segregation of Christian practices from those of secular law indicates that the rulings reflect a time when Christianity was a minority religion. The continued activity of Druids as religious practitioners is witnessed into the early 8th century, when Christianity became the dominant faith. The law tract Brehe Crulige sought to deny Druids any privileges of sacred status. The near contemporary Collectio Canonum Hibernicensis stigmatizes Druidry, Dieberg, satire, and heresy as activities contrary to the Church. It is worth exploring this list more fully. Druidry was banned because of its pagan connotations, but the other activities are not inherently pagan. Heresy represented Christian beliefs contrary to the church teachings of the Church. Dieberg describes marauding violence, sometimes with diabolical associations, which operated outside the moral code of the Church. Satire may also have been opposed because it undermined authority, but collectio may also refer to a belief in the efficacy of the malevolent words of satirists to cause physical harm. The texts of the 8th century suggest society was largely Christian, in which lingering heathen practices were classed along with the heinous crimes of bad Christians. Druids were the focus of Christian denunciation as a religious caste whose status challenged the status of the Church. Not all features of a heathen society would be done away with. Druids were suppressed, but the pre-Christian roles of judges and poet were adapted to Christian society. The First Synod of St. Patrick attempted to segregate native law from Christian law, but by the time of the 7th century Canones Hibernicensis, the concept of natural goodness is used to justify laws inherited from a pagan era. Although satire was condemned, the art of the fili, learned poet, or literally seer, was accepted within a Christian milieu. A key part of their role was to praise and legitimize the deed of kings. These spin doctors of the early Middle Ages were too important to lose, but their work was also more profound and entertaining. They were guardians and transmitters of oral culture who could tell stories of the past and were credited with powers to see into the future. The Church continued to legislate against practices that might harken back to pagan rituals or that represented unorthodox beliefs. A 7th or 8th century poem that praises the rise of the Church of Kildare denounced the worship of auguries and use of spells that predict death. Similarly, penitentials condemned beliefs in witches and werewolves or the concoction of potions to excite love. The ancient festivals that marked the change of seasons continue to be celebrated as important markers in the farming year. These were Samhain, 1st of November, Imbolc, 1st of February, Bealtaine, May Day, and Lunasa, 1st of August. The year was also divided into a routine of Christian holy days. In the medieval conceptualization of time, Christian festivals jostled for space alongside older commemorations and sometimes displaced them, such as the celebration of St. Bridget's Day on Imbolc. The religious landscape. Just as the division of time was negotiated and appropriated by the new religion, so too was the organization of the physical landscape. Place names have preserved the pre-Christian veneration of rivers, wells, mountains, trees, and megalithic monuments as abodes of the gods in a polytheistic religion that was intimately intertwined with the experience of a physical place. The stories of these sites were perpetuated and developed into medieval lore along with the triumph of Christian sites in the landscape. The rise of great churches while nearby centers of pagan power declined is a theme pursued in poetry. Early churches may have deliberately situated close to an existing centers of authority where their patrons may have resided. Some may have been intended to displace the significance of earlier cult sites. At Armagh, the name of the hill, Ard Macha, or the height of the goddess Macha, is suggestive of its pre-Christian significance that was overridden by Ireland's most famous saint. The ability of saints, I believe that story was at Ardmacha. St. Patrick had basically a jewel of words and religion with the various druids, and he came out on top in a way to impress the king of the Eight at that time. The ability of saints to convert the landscape, along with the people in it, is reflected in saints' lives. And Saint Lives is capitalized. I think that's the name of a particular book or a kind of series of manuscripts. As well as Slán in Findamag, County Mayo, or Finma, St. Patrick was said to have encountered a pagan shrine that he dismantled. He then used the water to baptize many thousands. The saintly dedication of many features in the Irish landscape represented the Christianization of space, and this molded the experience of those who moved through it. While the Christian God is regarded as omnipresent, the cult of relics that developed in the early Middle Ages channeled a divine power into material objects. The construction of shrines and reliquaries to house relics is well attested in Ireland from the 7th century. Relics included the bones of saints and objects that they had worn or used in their lifetime that were thought to convey miraculous power. In Ireland, non-corporeal relics tended to be more popular. Churches that owned prestigious relics became centres of pilgrimage and accumulated wealth and status as a result. By the 8th century, Armagh had still sought to boost this prestige by importing relics from Rome, including those associated with Saints Peter, Paul, Stephen, and Lawrence, and Christ. While pilgrims were encouraged to visit shrines, relics could also be taken on tour. Their itineraries marked the areas of jurisdiction claimed by a church. The journeys were intended to boost the power of the church and encourage devotion among the laity. They were another way of marking God's place in the landscape. The cult of relics had an important consequence in medieval landscape, bringing burials into churchyards. The Irish name for a churchyard is relic, which is taken from the Latin reliquiae, relics. The belief developed that burial close to holy people brought protection on the Day of Judgment, when all people would rise together from their graves. In the Iron Age, cremation was often used to dispose of the dead. From the late 4th to the 6th century, this rite was gradually displaced by inhumation. This shift may reflect the adoption of Roman habits as much as Christianization. The additional orientation of graves east to west, so that the incumbent would stand facing the rising sun on the Day of Judgment, is a stronger reflection of Christian ideas. Special graves in the Iron Age were marked by mounds or furta. In the legal text, Dean Tuchtgud, on legal entry, a claim to land ownership included crossing the furta that stood on the boundaries of the land. It may be understood that the ancestral owners of the territory in the grave mounds acted as its spiritual guardians. The practice of inserting selected burials, both male and female, into mounds continued until the 8th century. These might be natural features of reused prehistoric tumuli, often located in prominent positions near natural boundaries. The inclusion of grave goods with some early medieval burials may hint at the continuity of earlier rites. At Parknowan, County Laois, an infant who died at some point between the 7th and 9th centuries was interred with an antler bone, a perforated horse tooth, and a quartz pebble. From the 6th century, the idea began to take hold in medieval Christendom that the faithful should be buried away from the heathen graves of their ancestors, and the dead were more fully interred into the world of the living through burials at churches that stood at the heart of the community. Initially, burial close to the church was a privilege of monks and nuns, monastic tenants and church benefactors. The early 8th century Collectio Canonum Hiberniensis urged the general populace to be interred in churchyards, but this was burial for a fee. Internment in consecrated ground became normative from the 8th century. This demonstrates not only the growing authority of the church, but also the evolution of new categories of social inclusion and exclusion. To be buried outside consecrated ground or in a devout, deviant fashion suggested that an individual held a liminal position in Christian society, and that his or her immortal soul was in peril. Two deviant burials dated to the 8th century were found side by side at Kilteesheen, County Roscommon, each with a large stone blocking their mouths. These finds may hint at a fear of revenants, which is attested in contemporary penitential literature and later saints' lives. The deviant burials at Kilteesheen correspond chronologically to deviant burials in Anglo-Saxon England. As well as offering mediation between this world and the next, burial practices reveal anxieties and segregation within Christian communities concerning death and salvation. As churches came to be regarded as sacred places, it was necessary to mark their boundaries. Churches on islands had their outer boundaries marked by the ocean, and those places of retreat loom large in modern imagery of the early Irish church. Well-known examples include Skellig Michael in County Kerry, Scattery Island in County Clare, Inishmurray in County Sligo, and Iona in Argyll. Early Irish churches often had more than one boundary, marking out levels of sanctity within the church settlement. At Iona, the sea acted as an outer boundary, regulating entry to the island. A ditch defined the middle boundary, and the church and cemetery formed an inner zone from which members of the public were excluded. The majority of early ecclesiastical enclosures in Ireland are 90 to 120 metres in diameter. At some sites, the enclosures were reworked as the settlement grew or contracted. Multi-valate enclosures have been uncovered at some church sites, including Nendrum in County Down, and Clonfad in County Westmeath, and Fanaw in County Leitrim. This pattern may have been modelled on the biblical description of Ezekiel's temple with its outer court for public visitors, an inner court for virtuous, and the central temple. The layout might also have been based on high-status ring forts that had up to 3 rings of banks and ditches, defining their social exclusivity as well as providing defence. I play a lot of the game called Mountain Blade Warband, and particularly the Viking Conquest version. And there's actually an area in Ireland in that game called... and it's based around the 800s, late 800s Viking Age in Ireland, England, or general Britain, I suppose, because it includes all of that island, as well as some Viking areas. And there's a particular castle called Cahar. What was it again? Cahar Holmain, which I think is actually one of the areas that was mentioned in our prior chapter. And it's kind of what made me think of this earlier, because I knew I recognized that. And it's actually a really cool map that they made for it. You can see the ring fort, and you can actually see this ring fort in real life as well. It's pretty much destroyed at this point, but you can see other 3-ringed ring forts, and these type of ring forts were on the coast. So the back of the ring they weren't full rings. They were sort of coastal cliff sea forts with the back against the cliffs, which were almost impossible to scale. Like, you couldn't. And having been to the borders, or not the borders, but the coast of Kerry, along certain areas, those cliffs rise so high into the air. But it just made me think of because that particular area is such a hard castle to take in the game. It's basically just a long hallway, and you're just getting pelted by skirmishers and archers. It's a very fun game. I might play it on stream someday. Types of churches. The rapid growth in the number of Irish churches in the 5th, 6th and 7th centuries required a degree of organisational adaptation to local circumstances. Which game was that? That was Mountain Blade, Warband, Viking Conquest. You're popping in and out. No worries, laughs a lot. Viking Conquest mod. Or DLC. Thus, Irish political structures and settlement patterns influenced the development of ecclesiastical provisions and hierarchy. Place names of ecclesiastical origin include elements such as Kell, Domnoch, Desert, Temple, and names that were often associated with sites of worship, including Teach and Cluin, suggests that one was never far from the church in medieval Ireland. Oh yes, good game. Never played Viking Conquest. I consider Viking Conquest to... Now, I haven't played a load of them, the entire conversion mods. And obviously Bannerlord offers a more tactical game. But I consider Viking Conquest to be the quintessential Mount and Blade experience. I think it is probably one of the most polished versions of the game you can get. And then there's a couple of other like add-on mods that help fix a lot of the things. It can take a lot to get used to, and it's definitely a bit more grindy at the beginning and a bit harder. But I guess I just love the time period, and I love the, like, you know, uniting Ireland or something, or being a Viking and raiding along the coast. It's a ton of fun. It's such a fun game. It does take time to get situated though. And what's very interesting is cavalry is not going to, you know, it's not like in normal warband where you can just hire a bunch of Swadian knights and just charge down everyone. Like, that's not going to work in this game. There's very little cavalry. There's a few high-end cavalry, but the thing is, in comparison to Warband, the vanilla game, you're able to form your men into, you loved your Kurgit Khanate, or Khanate. Yeah, the Kurgits are fun. I'm sure you're enjoying Bannerlord if you've been playing it. The horse archers are very good in that game, particularly the Khans Guard. But you do have horse archers, but they're more horse skirmishers. They have javelins that they throw from horseback. They're more so for dealing with the enemy skirmish line and then riding around and trying to throw in the back of them, in the back of their spear walls. But the thing is that even if you had like all of the elite units, the elite cavalry, I'm sure if you had an army of that it might be different, but there is way more spears. Almost every single mid-tier and high-tier spear and infantry unit has javelins, and they deal a lot of damage. You have so many more javelin and sling fighters, a lot more skirmishers. The Irish in the game actually have I think probably the strongest skirmishers in the game. And they will fuck you up. They will fuck you up. They will destroy your ass if you're not careful. If for whatever reason your like shield wall gets turned and you're facing even slightly to the side of them, they will just shred your line. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have elite units like a Ruadh sergeant or something. They will cut through your shit. Range reach is king. It really is. Although the other interesting thing in the game is that because everything is shield wall based, it's very difficult to kill the main shield wall, deal a lot of damage to them before the clash, because they have massive shields, so everything's going to bounce off them. It's almost like fighting in a very Nord-centric, if you've played Mount and Blade, Nord-centric gaming area. Of course, you can do different fighting styles. So you can probably do a cavalry campaign if you really wanted to. It would be difficult, but you could. You could do a spear wall or kind of like infantry based one. You could do primarily skirmishers, and they actually work really well if you're constantly like basically just kiting your enemy around. You can take out a good amount of groups, but it's quite difficult. It does require a good bit more tactical positioning than, you know, F1, F3, charge. You don't have the time to commit. You really should buy it. I think it's really, really good. Hang on, sorry. I'm gonna pull that back. What I played of it, I really enjoyed. However, I think I just prefer the atmosphere of Viking Conquest. It's definitely very well polished, but I think there is a lot of mods you probably have to get to bring it up. I think the battles in general are very good. The battles and the tactical ability of that has been greatly improved. Anyway, I'm going to get back to the reading. Textual and archaeological evidence has been used to estimate that there were more than 5,000 pre-1170 churches in Ireland. These would not have all been in use at the same time, as each century witnessed new foundations and the failures of less established or less fortunate institutions. Oh, and thank you, by the way, Crespian, for that hydrate. I just saw it. My bottle of water is on the floor. Hang on. I'm coming over. There we go. I think there's something up with my straw. Where were we? Many of the churches constructed before the 9th century were small wooden structures that had been dispersed, that had disappeared from view. From the 10th century, larger church sites proclaimed their status through cathedrals and round towers in stone, and a number of these can be seen in the Irish landscape. The earliest churches, and actually you can find, I think the oldest structure at the Rock of Cashel is an 11th century tower. And I've been to the Rock of Cashel. It's very, very cool. I would definitely recommend it. The earliest churches may have been private foundations of high-class converts. This would mirror the early villa communities of 5th century Gaul and Italy. They might be lifetime endeavours supported by the resources of kinland. More permanent churches may have been endowed with gifts or kinland by consent of relatives, on the understanding that family members would continue to control positions in their foundation. Genealogical literature refers to a myriad of proprietary churches that were associated with a particular dynasty, and the records themselves may have been the status of being charters of ownership. In the 7th century, the writer Tirchán envisioned many of Ireland's earliest churches being founded through grants of land from kings to clerics. St. Patrick would then arrive to bless them and take them under the protection of Armagh. Armagh. I don't know why I keep saying Armagh. I think the way I'm reading kind of just leads me to go Armagh rather than Armagh. Armagh. The idea that Patrick visited all of these sites seems to be an anachronistic claim to Armagh's superiority over them. And that was something as well. I think it was maybe Iona, Armagh, and like 2 or 3 other main monasteries and churches were kind of vying for dominance over each other. Other churches were assigned separate origins or taken under the control of other large church settlements. In addition to private estates, churches, reference is made in early texts to a communal church for each tua. The 8th century law text Brehon Nemed Taoiseach envisages that each tua should have a church served by a priest and a scholar. The old Irish penitential charges clerics or nuns who dwell in such a communal church to grant any excess wealth they might accumulate to the poor of the church. Place names with the element domnoch, from Latin domicium, or dominicum, may refer to early foundations that were the main churches of a tua. More than 100 places bearing domnoch names can be identified. These clusters in the central, east and north of the island. An example of a domnoch site is Donapatrick in the royal landscape of Telltown, County Meath. Perhaps replicating a pattern found across Europe of churches being located near sites associated with their secular patrons. Tirchán asserted that every civitas founded by a bishop in Ireland should owe allegiance to Armagh. This was based on the claim that God gave St. Patrick jurisdiction over all of the island of Ireland. It seems to have been envisioned at one stage that each tua would have an episcopal church, but as power structures in Ireland became more centralised, only larger churches might boast an episcopal seat. Larger churches, or civities, were multifunctional sites with a cluster of buildings. They sometimes attracted secular settlements outside their precincts for landless clients, craftspeople and visitors. According to the law tract, Brehon Nemed Taoiseach, the qualities of a good church were to have incumbents who were following an active and contemplative life, as well as visitors performing penance. Such a church was expected to provide services of baptism, communion, and mass, prayers for death, and hospitality. These duties required various functionaries, including a priest, a scribe, a steward, and male or female coenobites. One of the larger church settlements of medieval Ireland was of Kildare. Its founder, Bridget, was said to have died in the 520s. There is debate among scholars as to whether she was a real woman or a pagan goddess transmuted into a Christian saint. Nevertheless, evidence for a pre-Christian cult of Bridget in Kildare is lacking, and the earliest hagiography was written less than 150 years after her supposed death. These details favour the view that she was a real person. By the early 7th century, the church had a community of nuns headed by an abbess and a bishop. The writer Cogitosus describes the great wooden church at Kildare in the mid-7th century and the throngs that visited. He also mentioned that the treasures of kings were kept there. Although Bridget's kin group, the Fourth Heart, had little political significance other than through their link to the church, Kildare had close links to the Dunlain kings of Leinster. Or Dunlain. Lena, probably. Bridget's great house and oratory are referred to in 964, when the clerics of the churches were ransomed from the Vikings. A stone church had been built in Kildare by 1050, and a round tower dating from the 12th century, although perhaps replacing an earlier monument, still stands. The church maintained its significance as an episcopal seat throughout the Middle Ages, despite suffering numerous military attacks. To maintain its position, the church must have held considerable landed resources and had the support of powerful lay figures. The cult of saints. Saints were key figures of Christianization in the Christianization of Ireland. Their dedications and relics redefined the landscape, and their feast days marked the passage of time. Saints are regarded as holy people who could perform miracles through the grace granted to them by God in life and after their death. Until the 12th century, sainthood was conferred by popular acclaim rather than through ecclesiastical procedures. Many charismatic founders of churches in the 6th and 7th centuries were enthusiastically endorsed as saints. This included Comgall of Bangor, County Down, Kieran of Clonmacnoise in County Offaly, Finian of Clonard, County Westmeath, and Columba of Durrow of County Offaly, and Iona in Argyll. A myriad of local cults developed alongside those of major saints, either reflecting founders of small churches or variant forms of larger cults. In this way, the imported religion of Christianity soon became embedded within local heritage and identities. From the mid-century, 7th century, written accounts of the deeds of saints became popular in Ireland. Saints' lives were prominent in hagiographic literature, but litanies, hymns, and poems reveal the attributes that the early Christian laity saw in their saints. Their qualities were often modelled on biblical accounts of Christ and Old Testament prophets. In the Old Irish Life of Saint Bridget, the saint created a stream by striking a staff in the ground in the manner of Moses, and turned water into beer in imitation of Christ's transmutation of water into wine at the wedding of Cana. Motifs used in saints' lives are also drawn from continental hagiography, classical stories and native folk tales. These literary attributes made saints' lives into an entertaining and memorable written genre. Miracles involving healing, raising the dead, and providing food account for the majority of narrative episodes. Their prominence also tapped into fears of ill health, starvation, and death that stalked the lives of the medieval laity. Sometimes sublime and mundane matters occupied the same folios. Visions and prophecies might condemn or elevate the fortunes of a political lineage, or a saint might struggle with a king over property rights or legal matters. In competition for lay patronage and donations, saints also needed to have their unique selling points. Saint Bridget, for example, was famous for her hospitality, while Saint Brendan's miraculous journey across the ocean made him a patron of seafarers. Saints, both male and female, were also shown to be inveterate travelers in order to link them personally to many different locations. Competitions between cults could also lead to sharp practices among hagiographers. The The Latin Life of St. Caoch draws episodes from an earlier Life of St. Columba, not as one might expect to celebrate the earlier saint, but to portray Caoch as a superior alternative. Hagiographic literature throws into relief fundamentally different ways of understanding the world in medieval thought. There was a human need to explain and seek to control natural hazards, but without a modern scientific understanding, the invisible worlds of this natural science were interpreted as divine by the forces of good and evil. In the Latin Life of St. Columba, penned by Adamnan, the saint was miraculously able to see demons who wished to inflict illness on the monks of Iona, and he expelled them from the island. On another occasion, Columba saw rain clouds bearing disease coming towards the island, and he blessed bread to be distributed as a cure. The blightings of foodstuffs and failure of crops were attributed to malevolent spirits. While saints and holy peoples had the power to banish them, popular remedies also developed, drawing on the power of holy words into herbal treatments and amulets. Holy words thus had the ability to channel divine power along the invocations to the saints. These beliefs are illustrated side by side in an 11th century prayer that calls upon the protection of Irish female saints against demons and evil people, sickness, lies, cold, hunger, plague, and monsters. Penitence and asceticism. According to the 7th century alphabet of piety, the rite of baptism brought renunciation of the world, the devil, and passions of the flesh. When this renunciation slipped, penitence was required to secure entry into the heavenly kingdom. By this definition, the sin is to embrace worldliness, the temptations of the devils, and the passions of the flesh. It was not simply a matter of causing harm to others. Crimes of thought as well as deed could separate a soul from God. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory the Great adapted the works of a 5th century writer to compile a list of 7 deadly sins that are still familiar in popular culture. Early Christianity advocated public confession, followed by punishment for sin, but the idea quickly developed in Ireland to promote rehabilitation of the sinner by private means, rendering spiritual compensation for the crime to God overseen by a bishop. In effect, sin was seen as a spiritual debt that could be paid off by self-improvement, almsgiving, or self-mortification. The Irish approach may be seen to mirror that of Gaelic secular law, where crimes could be resolved by private negotiation and compensation overseen by a judge. The need to provide an equitable tariff of self-mortification led to the development of penitential texts. The earliest surviving example was penned by Saint Finian in the 6th century. Other penitentials and texts relating to penance have survived from early medieval Ireland, which may have led West European thought on this issue. The segregation of the world into categories of holy and unholy, worldly and unworldly, may have been a major change in the worldview introduced by Christianity. The pleasures of food and sex came to be regarded as spiritual pollutants that should be overcome through fasting and abstinence. The penitential of Finian accepted that pious people who were married could enter the kingdom of God, but sex was prohibited on holy days. Separation from the things one loved in the world was taught to aid unworldly contemplation. For this reason, penance could also involve separation from home and family. Penitents could become temporary members of religious communities, contemplating their period of penitence under the guidance of an abbot. The 7th century Liber Angeli records that penitents were entitled to hear the gospel preached each Sunday in the northern church of Armagh, along with devout people, virgins, and those who served the church in lawful matrimony. Some might choose to leave their worldly existence for good, in a state of permanent pilgrimage to atone for earlier sins. Monks and nuns might also choose to live under a penitential regime in a search for spiritual advancement, or as a form of self-martyrdom. Some of Ireland's most famous 6th century saints, Columba, Cumgall, and Columbanus, represented the social elite of ascetic idealists who would have been familiar with each other's endeavours. The writings of Columbanus and Finian reveal concerns over the stability of monks who were enthusiastic to seek out a harsher monastic regime. The idea of testing one's spiritual endurance as superhuman limits remained a popular theme in Irish religious writings. The ninth century monastery at Tala relates a tale of a virgin copper who took on an increasingly harsh diet to the point where if a needle was thrust into her hand, no blood would come out. In notes that were added to the Martyrology of Ongus, we have a tale of Saint Scotheen of Tiscoffin, County Kilkenny, who was said to have slept blamelessly each night between two attractive virgins, so, quote, that the battle with the devil might be greater. Can I use that argument, guys? Can I use that argument? To sleep in the bed of two attractive women. More often, places of retreat were sought out from the temptations offered by lay communities. The rigours of monastic retreat are vividly revealed at the island of Skellig Michael, which rises from the sea like a twin-peaked mountain off the west coast of Kerry. On the northern summit are two small stone oratories, 6 beehive huts, a graveyard and a small garden, which might be enough to contain a small community of monks. On the southern pinnacle was a hermitage that can only be reached by rock climbing. Here stood a simple oratory and water collecting basin on a barren and wind-swept ledge. The Irish abroad. The battle with the devil requires sacrifices. I'll have to find a few attractive women to lie in beds for such sacrifices, for such battles. The Irish abroad. Some monks in search of a penitential life left Ireland altogether. This act of self-exile mirrored one of the harshest penalties in secular law. Some of these peregrini, that looks much more like an Italian word, peregrini, would become famous church founders and scholars who gave Ireland its reputation as an island of saints and scholars. Saints Columba and Columbanus are perhaps the most famous examples. Columba, was a member of the Unail dynasty of Kenil Conel. He was educated in Ireland and studied scripture with Bishop Finian, who may be the author of the penitential mentioned earlier. Columba set out towards Britain in 563, and he was granted the island of Iona, on which he founded his first church. Columba courted controversy in his lifetime, and he was temporarily excommunicated at a synod held at Telltown, County Meath. His evangelical work among the Picts was nevertheless successful, and is touched upon in the eulogy Amra Columcille, which was composed soon after his death in 597. One of Columba's successors, Segin, sent a mission to Northumbria, and the Irish mission was later extended to Mercia and Essex. However, opposition arose in the 7th century Britain regarding traditions of the Church of Iona that differed from those at Canterbury, which had been evangelicalized from the continent. As a result, the influence of Irish churchmen in Britain waned from the late 7th century. Despite the decline in Iona's influence, Columba's biographer Adam Nawn was able to write of the fame of the saint in Britain, Spain, Gaul, Italy, and Rome around the 700s, or around 700. Columbanus was a near contemporary of Columba. He was the son of a Leinster nobleman who received his education at Bangor, County Down, and left for the continent around 591. We have a rich testimony of Columbus's deeds, or Columbanus's deeds, through his own writings, including letters, sermons, monastic rules, poetry, and a penitential, as well as a life of the saint, written within a generation of his death. Columbanus won support in Burgundy to found monasteries at Angray and Luxeuil, or Luxeuil. Luxeuil. I'm not too sure how to pronounce that, and if there's any French watching, they would probably be disgusted. Luxeuil. During his career, Columbanus ran into disagreements with some of his monks over the strictness of his monastic regime, and Frankish bishops over the calculation of Easter. And this calculation of Easter, I think, was something that was quite regularly debated between the Irish churches and the French and Rome. I think it was a big discussion though in the early like 6th and 8th centuries. When Columbanus chastised Theodoric II of Burgundy regarding his sexual morals, he was obliged to leave the kingdom. Columbanus eventually settled in Lombardy, where he died at his foundation at Bobbio in 615. Columbanus's writings show him to be a highly skilled and widely read author, as well as a devoted ascetic. These qualities reflected on his education he received in Ireland and on his experiences abroad. The quality and prestige of Irish scholarship led a number of Irish clerics to be recruited to the courts of European rulers. Emperor Charlemagne recruited some of the best scholars in Europe to his court. He gave patronage to a number of Irishmen, including the astronomer and poet Dungal of Bobbio and the hagiographer and poet Donatus of Fiesole. Charlemagne's successors continued in this vein, providing support to the poets Sedulius Scotus, the geographer Dicule, and the philosopher John Scotus Uragena. Dicule also refers to the existence of nameless exiles who sought out remote hermitages in the northern seas until their activities were curtailed by Vikings. I think I have something to... Let me double check, because I know that there's another guy called Uragena. Or no, I think I'm thinking not Uragena, but rather John Scotus. I feel like there's another name that's very similar, but John Scotus Uragena was, I believe, a very, very unique scholar and theologian, particularly for his influence, or because of his influence from the Neoplatonic school. And from what I've heard from just little bits of reading here and there, his work from a Neoplatonic perspective is incredible in terms of his... I think he has a book particularly called The Division of the Natural World or something like that, which looks into the metaphysics and theology of both Christianity and obviously metaphysics. And I'd love to read it someday. But from what I've heard, I think some people have referred to him as possibly one of the greatest Neoplatonists and Christian theologians of that period, kind of the early Middle Ages. The religious enthusiasm of some travellers is witnessed in a record in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for the year 891. I apologize. I had to go to the door for a second. Okay, back. It reports that 3 clerics had set out in a boat from Ireland made of only 2.5 animal hides and no oars, but had landed in Cornwall and made their way to the court of King Alfred. The condition of their self-imposed exile tallies with the procedure of setting adrift in Irish law. This entailed an offender being sent out in a small boat with limited provisions, so that his fate could be determined by God. Other Irish men and women travelled in more comfort as pilgrims. The activities of early medieval Irish peregrini helped establish the cult of Gaelic saints across Europe. How many pages is left of this? Ooh, we have another 20 to go. What time is it? Okay, yeah, we can read for another while. Dealing with difference. The Easter debate. The Easter controversy that plagued the careers of Columbanus and the successors of Columbus demonstrates that, as the Church became bigger and more interconnected in Western Europe, divergence in local practice became less acceptable. Differences in religious practice had theological and political implications. Throughout the Church, Easter was to fall on a Sunday during the 3rd week of the first lunar month of the year. The cycle of Easter calculation in Ireland allowed Easter to be celebrated between the 14th and the 21st day of the first lunar month, but the cycle adopted in Rome in the early 6th century only allowed Easter to be celebrated between the 15th and the 21st day. In practice, Easter was often celebrated on the same day for both reckonings, but where divergence happened between communities in contact, it threatened the unity of the church. A cycle of 19 years for calculating Easter was adopted by much of southern Ireland and Irish churches on the continent in the early 7th century. Northern parts of Ireland and churches founded in Britain by the Irish held on to their inherited traditions of calculating Easter, which may have originated in Gaul in the 5th century, according to the 84-year cycle. Now, I don't know much about the cycles that they're talking about here. In Northumbria, matters came to a head at the Synod of Whitby in 664, when the older method of calculating Easter was rejected. This was a major blow to the influence of the Church of Iona in Britain. The dispute raged on between Gaelic churches until Iona adopted the Dionysian calculation of Easter in 916. However, the damage caused by the dispute contributed to the decision to expel Columban clergy from Pictland in 717. Other differences of practice within Gaelic churches would also come under criticism, including forms of tonsure and monastic rules. Ireland eventually chose to adopt the regular form of tonsure, shaving the top of the head and allowing the hair to grow in a ring around the side. And Irish churches on the continent adhered to the rule of Saint Benedict. However, diversity in practice of the religious life persisted at a local level in Ireland. Despite the success and high standards of many Irish churches, wider institutional intolerance of their differences would have harsh consequences. Episcopal jurisdiction. The relationship that a church had with surrounding communities is defined by the words parochia and familia, whose exact meanings has excited debate regarding the organization of the early Irish church. The 8th century Northumbrian author Bede referred to a peculiar custom at Iona, that the church was headed by an abbot rather than a bishop. This comment has been mistakenly generalized into a model for the church in Ireland, dominated by monasteries. Closer evaluation of the 7th and 8th century texts has made it clear that bishops consistently held a central role in Irish churches. They commonly dwelt at churches that had a coenbietic community. The term parochia, found in Irish texts, was a variant spelling of Latin parochia, origin of the English word parish. It was an earlier term of pastoral jurisdiction, defining the area subject to an episcopal church. It might correspond geographically with a secular unit of government, whether a tuatha or a group of tuatha, under the rule of an overking. If the size of a diocese increased, assistant bishops or Episcopi might help minister at a local level. Collectio Canonum Hibernicis, which was compiled in the 8th century, presents a view of episcopal hierarchy that complements that of kings. There were 3 grades of bishop. The lowest level may be associated with a civitas, and the middle with a sub-province wielding authority over a number of minor bishops. At the top of the hierarchy was a provincial bishop, who may be regarded as the ecclesiastical equivalent of a provincial overking. Annalistic reference tended to define bishops by their church rather than by their territorial sphere. However, in the 10th and 11th centuries, definitions of jurisdiction are more common and provide more insight into the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Lower rank bishops were equated with small kingdoms in which the church was situated. Middle rank bishops might include the bishops of Shiel Nead Slán and Thomond. Provincial provincial bishoprics are referred to for Munster, Connacht, Leinster, and O'Neill. Primacy of honour among provincial bishops was accorded to the See of Armagh as a successor of St. Patrick, Apostle of Ireland. From the 7th century, Armagh sought to turn this honour into jurisdictional power over the churches of Ireland. The ambition was opposed by the St. Bridget's Church of Kildare. Kildare seems to be the most powerful see in southern Ireland in the central decade of the 7th century, and an advocate of the Roman calculation of Easter. Kildare claimed all Ireland as its parochia in the mid-7th century. Armagh's adherence to the older 84-year Paschal cycle was also becoming a barrier to its ambitions for supremacy in Ireland. Wilfrid, Bishop of York, may have used the matter of non-compliance with Rome as justification to claim some sort of authority over churches in northern parts of Ireland in 680. After Armagh adopted the Roman Dionysian calculation of Easter in the 680s, the See of St. Patrick asserted its metropolitan claims in Ireland more vigorously through hagiographic writings in the closing decades of the 7th century. A counter-rhetoric developed to oppose these claims. For example, in Munster, the Church of Emly claimed that its patron St. Alba had ministered before St. Patrick, and therefore that Armagh should not have precedence over Emly. These associations of jurisdictional authority were important as they had political ramifications. Armagh sought secular support for its ambitions through a series of astute alliances. These alliances offered to a secular patron a level of spiritual endorsement and influence through the agency of the Church. In the early 9th century, the Bishop of Armagh made common cause with Felimid mac Crimin, over King of Munster. Felimid allowed the law of Patrick to be proclaimed in Munster, and he attacked the Church of Clonmacnoise, whose ambitions had clashed with Armagh. In the 10th century, Armagh initially allied with the overkings of the southern Nunail, and later shifted allegiance to the Munster dynasty of Dalkesh. Armagh famously endorsed the claim of the Dalkesh overking Brian Boru to be, quote, Emperor of the Gaels. Despite these efforts, Armagh's claim to archiepiscopal supremacy in Ireland encountered further resistance in the 11th century. The matter would only be resolved with the restructuring of the Irish Church in the 12th century. Church offices. While the term parochia denoted territorial jurisdiction, familia described the community associated with a church. Given the significance of kin in Ireland, the terminology is appropriate. Positions in the church were often hereditary, whether as landowners, office holders, or patrons. A familia could refer to the personnel of one church or a group of churches that were linked by a dynasty, cult, or ownership. The familia of St. Columba included members of the church founded by the saints and his successors. These included Iona, Durrow, Derry, Kells, and Screen. The term familia also overlapped with parochia, as it could refer to the heads of churches within a larger jurisdictional unit, such as those subject to Armagh or Kildare. Connections between churches were underpinned by visitations and hagiographic writings that claimed links between founding saints as friends, relatives, or pupils. In these relationships, a presiding church might exact tribute from a dependent church or provide the leader for a church where a local candidate was lacking. Hi Woody, thank you for the lurk. Hope you're having a good weekend. The leadership of a church might rest in the hands of an abbot, bishop, or corab. The term corab, is derived from Old Irish comarba, meaning the heir of a saint. It is sometimes used interchangeably with the term erna, or erchanok, or church leader. These were overseers of the temporalities in large institutions. They were not required to be in holy orders, although they were often tonsured as a sign of their ecclesiastical office, and their positions could often be hereditary. The interchange of leadership of churches between abbots, bishops, and corabs indicates the multifunctional aspects of church settlements. The prominence of monastic, clerical, and administrative roles could vary from church to church. Sometimes the duties of leadership were combined so that the abbots might also serve as bishops. In larger institutions, there might be greater specialization. Thus, as the Church of Armagh, from the 10th century, the role of coarbs or enera tended to be distinct from the bishops. Coarbial duties included routine administration and travelling to represent the church as a negotiator and to gather tribute. These tasks might be taken on by a bishop or abbot. However, the primary role of the abbot was to force on care of monks and penitents, while the bishop was responsible for ministry and pastoral care. Church offices were also incorporated into the Irish legal system of status, comparable to secular grades. However, a single ecclesiastical hierarchy was not envisioned, but rather three parallel structures: the priesthood from bishop to doorkeeper, scholarship from master to pupil, and administration from enera to cooks, millers, or gardeners. It is not uncommon for a cleric to hold more than one office. The combination of roles was often complementary. For example, expertise in religious law was practical for a bishop or abbot, while periods of spiritual withdrawal as an anchorite could support their role as spiritual directors. The pillars of active or contemplative religious life were priests and monks. Priests were essential figures in pastoral ministry, and a shortage of priests was a concern in texts in the 8th century. Priests often lived within the communities they ministered to. As entry to the priesthood occurred in the medieval life cycle, many had wives and children before they took holy orders. The church allowed them to remain with their families in a state of celibacy, and a priest's wife might be a respected figure in society. Nevertheless, Irish religious literature displays concern over rumours of sexual misconduct and the spiritual impurity associated with unchaste priests. It was only in the 11th century that clerics were ordered to send their wives away, although such regulations were widely flouted. When it comes to defining monks in early medieval Ireland, the terminological waters are muddied by the adoption of ecclesiastical words into secular life. For example, the Irish word for household, munter, is taken from the Latin monasterium, and the service of a cleric to his lord was machina, derived from the Latin monachus, a monk. Such borrowings attest to the impact of the early church on Irish society. In a similar way, the term manig, monks, did not only describe conobites. It described a broad category of people subject to the jurisdiction and protection of a church leader, regardless of whether they were laymen or clerics, or bound to a monastic rule. The lay clients of the church were themselves a diverse group, whose members could range in status from servile retainers and rent payers to aristocratic adherents. The feature commonly to Irish manig were their socio-economic relationships to a particular church. A range of texts makes clear that a category of manig lived communal lives according to monastic rules. In common with monks and nuns across Christendom, these rules included poverty, chastity, and obedience. The monastic day was structured around canonical hours from the chanting of psalms, hymns, and prayers. Oftentimes, between meals and sleep were dedicated to study, prayer, and labour, which could be manual, administrative, or scholarly. Irish monks and nuns followed practices common throughout Western Europe, but with some local variations regarding ascetic practices of silence, fasting, and periods of solitude. There was also seems to have been less segregation on church sites between male and female religious than was seen elsewhere in Europe from the 9th century. While the rule of Saint Benedict became standard for coenobitic life across much of Western Europe in the 10th century, there were continued adherents in Ireland to ideas and practices that were often attributed to founder saints. The monastic rules that have survived from early medieval Ireland often consists of precepts and moral advice, rather than detailed regulations. These may be regarded as guides to inner life more than as rules for outward observance. Assemblies and laws. Synods are ecclesiastical assemblies convened to deal with administrative issues or resolve disputes relating to the faith, church discipline, or laws. Usually, synods in the early Middle Ages were composed of bishops, but in Ireland, non-episcopal heads of churches and leading scholars also participated. This reflects the threefold nature of the church hierarchy discussed earlier. Assemblies were important venues for communication in a landscape of dispersed church settlements. Annalistic references suggest that synods were held at both a provincial and an interprovincial level, depending on the nature of the issues discussed. The debate over the celebration of Easter in the early 7th century appears to have prompted meetings from the northern half of Ireland and the southern half. The meeting of a synod might sometimes correspond with that of an Onach, or lay assembly, or rigdal, meeting of kings, that was attended by clerics. For example, in 789, Doncad Midi, king of Tara, dishonoured the relics carried by the abbot of Armagh during an Onach at the royal seat of Ruadh Ahar. The law tract, Crit Gablach, states that a king could pledge a con, an edict, on his people at an assembly. The promulgation of a con was not... Or no, Cian? No, con was an important legal development. for it meant that certain crimes were not matters to be resolved privately simply by the payment of compensation, but were crimes of public interest. A number of edicts were associated with the church. The Law of Adamnan, Cain Adamnan, oh no, probably Cain, yeah, issued in 697, made the penalty for killing or wounding a child, woman or cleric significantly greater than the sliding scale of private compensation payments recommended in contemporary secular law. The Cain was less mindful of status, as payments were a fixed rate, regardless of the status of the victim. Some of the punishments also involve the public spectacle of penitence. As well as giving the church extra legal authority, Cain Adamnan served to raise revenues for the community of Iona, which received a share of the fines. Cain Adamnan was one of a series of ecclesiastical ordinances issued in Ireland from the late 7th to the early 10th centuries. They reinforced the jurisdiction of major churches, helped to impose a moral code on the laity, and were an opportunity to make profit. They reflected the powerful position of the church had obtained in Irish society by the late 7th century. The promulgation of church laws at assemblies had declined by the 10th century, perhaps corresponding with the decline of Oneg as political assemblies. By the early 10th century, ecclesiastical jurisdictional spheres and tribute gathering had settled into a more organized system that made the ad hoc issue or reissue of church ordinances less useful. Meanwhile, the centralization of royal power may have led to a decline in the political importance of the secular assemblies at which the laws had been communicated. Funding. A cain was one of the many methods adopted by the church to raise revenues for its maintenance and ministry. Other streams of income may be defined in categories of gifts and endowments, one-off payments and pastoral contracts. From the time of conversion, devotees present gifts of movable goods and land to the church. For example, saint lives not infrequently show pious individuals submitting themselves and their land to a church or saint, to be held by their descendants in lease. Through such donations, churches quickly became landowners and accumulated stock. Another form of funding was to charge for each service a cleric performed. This idea is witnessed at the early stage in the 6th century penitential of Finian, where a cleric is entitled to seek alms for his service. A range of other early medieval religious and legal texts refer to payments, alms, or reflection being given to priests for fulfilling specific services, including preaching or performing mass, baptism, communion, and last rites. This pay-as-you-go system may have operated in times and places where more regular contracts between the laity and the church were lacking. In the 6th century, the idea of paying an annual tithe, a tenth of one's property, developed in Latin Europe. In return for regular payments, the church was expected to provide ongoing pastoral support. In texts from 7th and 8th century Ireland, there is some disagreements as to how tithes should be calculated. This may reflect a system in its infancy where the practicalities were still being ironed out, or it may be that different churches favoured different interpretations of a general rule. There is some debate as to how widely tithes were applied in Ireland. Manig, church dependents, by choice or circumstances, were more firmly tied into the system. Payments made by Manig included an annual tithe of livestock and tillage. To this was added firstlings, which often meant the first male offspring of humans and animals, and first fruits, which could mean the first share of each crop, and the first offspring of each species of livestock each year. A death due could also be charged. Labour services were also expected, but might vary according to the status of each manach. The church's ability to control manpower may explain why labour-intensive practices of arable farming tended to be more associated with church settlements than with ring forts. In return for all of these payments, it is stated that the laity were entitled to baptism, communion, prayers for the dead, preaching and mass. Texts from the 8th century espouse the ideal that the laity in general should be obliged to pay tithes, but this seems to have been more aspirational than reality. In the 9th and 10th century, secular authorities on the continent and in England enforced the general payment of tithes. However, the centralizing power of these kings exceeded that of their Irish counterparts. It is not clear how widely the payments of tithes, first fruits, and firstlings was applied in Irish society beyond those classed as manig. An alternative to calculating tithes was to levy a regular ecclesiastical tax on the laity. There is a better evidence for a general application of this model in texts dating from the 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries. Ecclesiastical taxes could apply to the people of a region or regions with the cooperation of their kings. In the Middle Irish life of St. Neil, a band of noble youths are baptized by the saint. In return, their leader, Luan, son of Igelach, vows that his people will pay ecclesiastical taxes thereafter. The event is said to have taken place in the 6th century, but the episode may have been invented to provide a historical justification for contemporary fiscal claims. Similarly, in his Latin life, St. Finan of Kinnity demands that the King of Munster hand over the tax of his people. Otherwise, his residence would be burned with heavenly fire. The text may be dated from the end of the 8th century to the beginning of the 10th century. From the 9th century, there are references to church officials called mayor, who collect revenues from a cairn or a census in a particular district. They may also have travelled around the areas of their jurisdiction to administer church laws. The aspiration of the Church of Armagh to levy an ecclesiastical tax on the citizens of Dublin around 1100 is witnessed in a poem found in the Book of Rights and Book of Umain. An ounce of gold was levied for every 24 men, a screple for each nose. The idea of a nose tax may have come to Ireland through contact with other churches in the North Atlantic. A similar tax is mentioned in relation to Munster churches in the Book of Lismore. The version of the poem in the Book of Umain also claims 1/10 of all goods that arrived in Dublin for St. Patrick. It may be deduced that secular leaders cooperated with the Church in ensuring the payment of regular dues throughout Ireland by AD 1100. This secured a level of pastoral care for the people and assisted kings in their own bid to secure more political and economic control over their subjects. The Church in early medieval Ireland was funded by various methods. There were donations of land and gifts that could be used as endowments. Alms and payments were also received on an ad hoc basis in return for services. Regular payments of tithes, first fruits, and firstlings were levied from Manig, and there was the aspiration that all the laity should make these payments. Over time, larger churches were successful in obtaining share of their revenue from subject churches in return for their protection and management. Powerful churches also issued religious edicts to raise revenues from the late 7th to the 9th century. These arrangements may have been displaced by the payment of regular ecclesiastical taxes that were implemented with the cooperation of kings. The system of gathering revenue and appropriating and apportioning responsibilities of pastoral care would also have been a spur to parochial organisation and reorganisation of Irish dioceses witnessed in the 12th century. The broad range of funding sources used by Irish churches placed them in a powerful position. The wealth of individual institutions gave them resilience in the face of famines, pestilence, and hostile attacks, which were recurrent threats in early Middle Ages. Now we get on to the Viking impact, and I think this is pretty much going to be, the rest of the main part of this chapter. The Viking impact. The impact of Vikings on the Irish Church is a topic that has excited the imagination of historians from the Middle Ages to the present. The contrast and image between marauding heathens dedicated to bloodshed and ascetic monks who could not be more stark. In 12th century saints' lives, reformers hailed the rebuilding of the Church, both physically and morally, which they thought had regressed through Viking influence. The long-held idea that Vikings were responsible for the progressive secularization and moral corruption of the Church has been effectively critiqued in recent decades. Medieval reformers appear to have exaggerated a picture of the Church in decay that suited their political and cultural agenda in calling for change. The question of Viking impact can be approached by analysing violence towards churches, assessing economic changes and religious conversion, and taking a broader view of institutional developments in the medieval church. As a result of their political and dynastic links, churches in Ireland were mired in local power structures, and therefore political violence before the Vikings arrived. A series of battles between powerful ecclesiastical settlements and between churches and Irish kings are recorded from the 760s to the 840s. This demonstrates that churches were able to put armies in the field to protect their power, and that they were not simply havens of prayer. These conflicts may reflect growing rivalry between powerful churches or increasing lay influence, or they may reflect a period of climactic decline that led to greater competition over diminishing resources. The late 8th century economic downturn has also been seen as a contributory factor to Viking raids in Europe. It has been demonstrated that in the 9th and 10th centuries, the Irish attacked churches as often as the Vikings. Really? So who was that by? There's often little references in there at the bottom of the pages. They're not particular notes, they're just references to different things. Lucas, plundering and burning. I'm going to fold that and take a read of that later. This does not mean that there were no differences in their attacks. The first Viking attacks are recorded in the 790s, and these naturally struck churches on islands first. Iona in Argyll, Inishbofin in County Galway, Inishmurray in County Sligo were among the churches raided in 795. Heathen Vikings feared the Christian God less than the Irish, and their desecration of holy places appalled contemporaries. In 824, Viking raiders shook the relics of St. Comgall of Bangor from their shrine. The reliquary may have been transported back to Scandinavia, along with other pieces of insular ecclesiastical and secular metalwork, many of which have been recovered from Viking graves in western Norway. Clerics were captured for ransom or sale overseas. Others, including Ethel, seized from the island church of Skellig Michael in 824, died in Viking hands. The individual trauma inflicted by Viking raids should not be downplayed, but their impact on the church as a whole is less than clear. From the 840s, it was not unusual for Vikings to work in concert with Irish allies to attack churches of their political rivals. The conversion of Vikings to Christianity over time may have ameliorated the violence against holy relics, but it did not diminish the number of raids on church settlements or the seizure of captives. It appears that economic and political strategies went hand in hand, regardless of religious scruples. Saint Boniface was in the right. What did he say again? I might not even recognize what this is in reference to. As noted earlier, ecclesiastical settlements were the main economic centres in pre-Christian Ireland. They were foci of arable production, technological development, manufacturing and trade. The attempt of the 8th century Collectio Canum Hibernicis to ban prostitutes, thieves and peddlers from ecclesiastical precincts illustrates some of the less desirable exchanges that took place at their sites. The church was also involved in overseas trade networks as suggested by the wheat, beer, wine sent from Nantes to Ireland as a gift to St. Columbanus, and the cloaks and shoes conveyed to the church of Normunter in Irish ships. He cut Donar's oak. Oh, I see. I get you. The cutting down of the many of the pagans' trees. It's quite a powerful image. But I guess when you kind of have, I mean, that's something that I think it was, who was it again? It was one of the Southern O'Neill, I believe. They cut down the inauguration tree of Brian Boru's family, of the Dalkesh, during a raid, and that was that's a significant thing to be able to do. That's a very much a political statement. Look how much power I have, that I can do this without fear of, I don't fear the consequences. Of course, eventually he would bend the knee. I wonder if they have to plant a new tree. Where were we? It can be argued that Vikings did not simply raid churches as stores of wealth, but used their economic potential for their own ends. Viking bases were commonly found in or near ecclesiastical sites. The churches at Dublin, Lindochel, and Annagassan and Limerick appear to have been driven out of business when they were seized by Vikings in the 840s. Other churches survived despite being used as Viking camps, include Clondalkin and Cork. Powerful churches were often situated within reach of communication routes and varied landscape resources. These attributes suited Vikings who used their bases for raiding and trading. The finds of weights, coins, and silver in the 9th century camp at Woodstown show that economic engagement with local people may have taken place at an early stage of Viking colonization. Vikings in Ireland failed to make any wide-ranging territorial gains. Their survival strategy was to use their skills and their overseas connections to thrive as craftsmen and traders. This led to the development of towns in Dublin, Limerick, and Waterford. Vikings may have attacked some churches as economic rivals, just as Viking settlements clashed with each other. However, Viking settlements also needed to develop positive trade links with the Irish polities and to tap into existing economic networks in order to flourish. A series of alliances between Irish and Viking kings attested from the mid-9th century aided this process. The 150 or so silver hoards deposited in Ireland that can be dated from the mid-9th to the mid-10th century illustrate trading networks. Often the biggest churches profited from the involvement in Viking trading networks. Silver hoards have been recovered from the most powerful church settlements, including Armagh, Glendalough, Durrow, and Clonmacnoise. Each of these sites was raided more than once by Vikings. As long as churches maintained their landed possessions and continued to attract artisans, traders, and visitors, they seemed able to recover from trauma inflicted by military attacks. Churches that had grown in significance during the 8th century often accumulated greater power and wealth during the Viking Age. They may have built more powerful connection with secular patrons for their defence. Clonmacnoise is a good example. The settlement experienced a boom and considerable expansion from the 9th to the 11th century. It housed busy workshops producing items from antler, bone, metal, and glass. And more than 700 cross slabs was carved at the site. Excavations in the urban landscape of Armagh provide similar evidence of settlement expansion from the 9th century. I could also see that being that like all of these monasteries and churches are being attacked, so the people around those areas are fleeing to the greater and larger churches for protection. I think that's also something to be considered. While the quality of Irish manuscript art and fine metalwork decreased somewhat during the Viking Age, the amount invested in religious art and architecture increased. The pages of the Book of Kells were illustrated as the first Viking raid struck Ireland, but its pages were never intended for mass consumption. High crosses, stone churches, and round towers are monuments that flourished in the Viking Age. These accomplished works were harder to destroy and were meant to be appreciated by many. In the 11th century and 12th centuries, high-quality reliquaries, crosiers, and crosses were created that combined Scandinavian and other imported art styles with Irish form and design. Literature also flourished, and the vitality of Viking Age artistic production may reflect the greater amounts of wealth in circulation as consequence of growing overseas trades. The conversion and Christianization of Vikings may have begun soon after they settled in Ireland. Archaeological evidence suggests that heathenism and Christianity existed side by side in 10th century Dublin. Finds from this period include a Thor's hammer pendant and a small bone cross. The gradual cessation of furnished burial by the mid-10th century was taken as evidence of Christianization, while the names of elite members of Dublin society indicated that they had adapted the cult of Irish saints. For example, Gil Patrick, servant of St. Patrick, who may be a member of the royal dynasty of Dublin, fell in battle in 983. King Olaf Cuaran of York and Dublin was baptized in England in 943, and he was an enthusiastic devotee of St. Columba. Olaf gave patronage to the church at Skryne, and he died in pilgrimage at the church of Iona in 980. Olaf may have championed St. Columba because the geographical range of the saint's cult matched his political ambitions. Iona had historical connections in Northumbria, and the church held a jurisdiction over parts of North Britain, the Kingdom of the Isles, and Ireland. Vikings drew upon a network of trading contracts with church settlements in the interior of Ireland. They may have also worked with ecclesiastical networks abroad. A number of churches in Britain are dedicated to Irish saints. Some of these were founded in the Viking Age or received renewed interest in their cults at that time. Maps of this cult of St. Bridget, St. Patrick, and less well-known saints in Britain complemented the distribution of Hiberno-Scandinavian metalwork finds. They may provide insight into trading routes across the Irish Sea. A church dedicated to St. Bridget in the 11th century London has been attributed to the activities of Hiberno-Scandinavian traders. The cult of a more obscure saint, Bega, appears to link Dalkey Island south of Dublin with St. Bees on the Cumbrian coast, and the Cumbrae Islands in the Firth of Clyde and Dunbar in Lothian in the Middle Ages. It is intriguing given the possible association between economic and cultic links that the now lost relic of St. Bega at St. Bede's was a silver arm ring with a cross marked at its summit. Perhaps this was of Hiberno-Scandinavian origin. A currency ring, as they commonly have a saltire cross impressed on the top of the ring. In a world that lacked modern levels of regulation or safety for international trade, shared values and trust between traders was important. Co-worship helped in providing the social nexus for trade, and it has been demonstrated that there were popular demands for churches to be established at market locations in 10th century England. It is perhaps ironic that Vikings, who were famed for plundering churches in Ireland, may have been agents of promoting the cults of Irish saints abroad. The evidence suggests that the impact of Vikings on Irish churches was far from one of simple destruction. Church settlements could both benefit and suffer from their dealings with raiders and traders. Large church settlements weathered Viking attacks well. Examples include the Church of Louth, Clonard, and Glendalough. These lay within raiding distance from Dublin and were attacked on more than one occasion, but they have a continuous set of obits for ecclesiastical leaders throughout the Middle Ages. Middle-ranked churches at Clondalkin, Finglas, and Talla, all within a short distance of the largest Viking-ruled settlement in Dublin, also endured. It is possible that many smaller and medium-sized churches that received sporadic or no mention in chronicles went out of business as a result of Viking attacks. Further archaeological research may shed light on this issue. The small church excavated at I don't even know how to pronounce that word. That's a difficult place name. Callerhillan seems to have been in use from the early 6th century until the late 8th century, but there was no evidence to link Vikings to its demise. Recent excavations at Clonford appear to correlate the demise of a medium-sized church with its violent desecration by Fir Tulloch, the local population group who may have objected to the church's alignment with a political rival. The decrease in smaller and middling churches at the expense of larger ones may be characteristic of broader changes in Irish society in the Viking Age. This period also witnessed the depression of minor political units and the centralization of power into the hands of regional overkings. Within these broader patterns of political change, Vikings may have been mere catalysts rather than the major agents of change. A contested area of Viking impact on Irish churches relates to institutional organization and moral standards. Vikings have long been blamed as agents of secularization within the Irish Church. Nevertheless, this paradigm has come under increasing criticism. The Irish Church before the Viking Age was characterized by small proprietary churches and large multifunctional ecclesiastical sites, led by a bishop, abbot, or coarb. Whether or not these were fixed territorial dioceses before the Viking Age is a matter of debate. It may be argued that dioceses were determined by the allegiances of people, and their boundaries might fluctuate with political circumstances. Episcopal jurisdiction, like those of kings, appear to have been well defined, as rules were in place against one bishop intruding in the sphere of another. There was also some flexibility where the seat of a diocese lay. The adaptable and decentralized character of Irish ecclesiastical structures gave them resilience during times of crisis. The Church in Ireland did not experience the large-scale appropriation of ecclesiastical lands or the centralized reforming agenda encountered in England from the 10th to 12th century. While the Church in England developed a more rigid, uniform, and hierarchical system that segregated the functions of monastic and secular churches, churches in Ireland continued to have localised and multifunctional systems of organisation. The institutional difference of the Irish Church compared to England or northern France were regarded as an aberration by reformers in the 12th century. Nevertheless, this administrative decentralisation did not mean that the Church of Ireland was less religious or effective. On the contrary, localised forms of organisation were resilient, adaptable, and efficient in providing spiritual care. The growing wealth of the larger Irish churches in the Viking Age did not cause an inevitable decline in moral standards. Payments to the church, according to texts written by churchmen, created a reciprocal obligation for spiritual services. Over time, systems of tithes, collections, and pastoral provisions became more comprehensive. It was important to secular patrons that the clergy who offered prayers on their behalf maintained spiritual moral standards. This is illustrated in an episode in the life of Saint Caoch. The worthy saint is praised in contrast to a gluttonous church leader who liked to travel ostensibly by chariot. Caoch's piety is shown to be more effective in winning divine favour for his lay people. 9th and 10th century saints' lives continue to show a concern with maintaining high religious standards among conventional monks. The Cíli Dé, clients of God, who emerged at the end of the 8th century, espoused a rigorous ascetic regime. By the 10th century, Cíli Dé had settled in some of Ireland's largest ecclesiastical communities, and they were particularly associated with attendance on the sick and the poor. Irish churchmen also maintained their high spiritual reputation abroad during the Viking Age. They attracted aristocratic and royal patronage, giving rise to new church foundations in Ottonian Germany. In general, the church did not appear to suffer a general depletion in its wealth or spiritual standards as a result of the Vikings, nor did it stagnate despite the claims of later reformers. In the 11th century, Ireland's contact with churches overseas increased. Travel to Rome was especially popular. No less than 9 Irish kings set out for Rome in the years of 1026 to 1064. Many clerics also undertook this pilgrimage. This gave renewed vigour to earlier church foundations along the route through Belgium, the Rhineland, and southern Germany. Mael Brigte, also known as Marianus Scotus, set out from Moville, County Down, for the continent in 1050s. He dwelt at 3 monasteries at Cologne, Fulda, and Mainz, where he died as a recluse in 1082. Mael Brigte is famed for a highly reputed universal chronicle that he wrote on the continent. A series of new foundations were also made for Irish monks in southern Germany in the late 11th and 12th centuries. Foremost among these was the Church of St. James at Regensburg that was founded in 1076 by Murdoch mac Robertic, also called Marianus, who had travelled to the continent with 2 companions. Despite the continued activities of Irish scholars and holy men abroad, the moral reputation of the Irish came under increasing criticism from the Norman and Anglo-Norman writers in the late 11th century. An early example can be found in the poem Moriot, composed by Warner of Rouen in the early 11th century. Warner wrote a satirical account of a rival Irish poet who had been captured by his homeland by Vikings and who eventually made his way to Rouen. Within the poem, Warner denigrates the Irish as promiscuous and bestial, claiming that the men did not wear trousers because they were frequently engaged in sexual activity. Now listen, the reason I'm not wearing trousers is... You know what? I'll leave that one. I'll leave that one for you guys to decide. Okay, look, he got me on the not wearing trousers part. That's all I'm gonna say. I am in fact not wearing trousers. I'm gonna save that stretch for a few minutes because we're coming to the end of this chapter. As the influence of the church on social mores increased in much of Europe, Ireland's secular marriage laws were seen to be increasingly out of step with canonical rulings. Ireland also lagged behind in economic development compared to the lands where the criticism originated. The Irish began to be seen as backwards and aberrant in some circles. The representation of Irish as other drew on images of barbarity from classical antiquity. Pope Gregory VII wrote to Lanfranc, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in the 1070s, mentioning rumours of the sinful marriage practices of the Scoti, and vested him with the authority to punish these crimes. The anti-Irish propaganda had a political edge, for it was used to justify the intervention of the English Church in the Irish affairs. Let me check something real quick about Pope Gregory, because I feel like there was something I remember. List of... No, not Gregory. I was thinking... Am I right in thinking... Excuse me a moment. Yes, I just because this reminded me of this, but in 1155, Pope Adrian IV, who is the only king, the only English pope to have ever been pope, issued the papal bull Laudabilter. The document supposedly commissioned the King Henry II to intervene in Ireland to assist in the reform of the government of the Irish Church and the Irish system of governance, according to the Latin Church ecclesiastical system. I knew I was thinking of something there. I couldn't remember if it was Gregory or Adrian, but it was Adrian who was the English Pope. Lanfranc was consecrated Archbishop of Canterbury in 1070 at the behest of William the Conqueror. 2 years later, Lanfranc outlined a claim to metropolitan authority over Britain and Ireland in a letter to the Pope. By the 11th century, Armagh's claim to ecclesiastical primacy in Ireland had been well established. Armagh had developed its prestige through association with St. Patrick and alliance with Ireland's most powerful kings. Some other churches that had formerly held great power became increasingly marginalised in the 11th century. These included Bangor and Iona. As power in Ireland shifted into the hands of the Umbrian kings in the late 11th century, even the precedence of Armagh was called into question. Lanfranc was able to cultivate links with Tordelbach Uabrian, over King of Munster, and appears to have won his support for 2 successive bishops of Ireland to be consecrated in England in 1074 and 1085. This may reflect a bid by Tordelbach to establish Dublin, a city that lay within his sphere of influence, as a rival to the ecclesiastical preeminence of Armagh. Lanfranc's successor Anselm also consecrated a bishop of Waterford in 1096. Anselm? That's not Anselm. Is that a... That is Anselm of Canterbury. I'm guessing that's gotta be, unless there was another one. Yeah, I just heard that name, but I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what he particularly did, but I just recognize the name. These arrangements helped support the claim of the See of Canterbury over the Irish Church, which would have important political ramifications in the 12th century. Conclusion. The adoption of Christianity entailed social and cultural changes as well as a reorientation of the soul. Older belief systems had a lingering influence for centuries after the mission of St. Patrick. In the Irish landscape, Christian and pagan place names might stand in close proximity. There was a gradual shift in the location of ritual activities towards the enclosed spaces of church settlements, and these places were sanctified by their association with the cult of saints. The church espoused the virtue of unworldliness as reflected in practices of penitence, asceticism, and exile. On the other hand, churches came into unedifying conflict over doctrine and jurisdiction, and its institutions became deeply enmeshed with local politics and dynasties. This uneasy coexistence of sacred aspiration and mundane reality may be illustrated by legal promulgations, arcana. These upheld moral tenets, but they also profited from the perceived sins of the laity and served to assert the power of a particular church. They became embroiled in violence, particularly during the Viking Age. However, the claim that Vikings had a catastrophic effect on the material and spiritual wealth of the church can be called into question. The ideals of the church were never cast aside, and its institutions proved to be resilient in the face of many challenges. A narrative of decline and immorality was nevertheless adopted by reformers in the late 11th century to suit their political ends. And thus ends the 5th chapter about religion from the 500 to 1100 AD. The next one is going to deal with the arts. It's just called the arts, so I'll be interested to see what we're going to be learning about. But I'm going to end the reading there because I want to go and have a sip of water. My voice is a little bit hoarse, I feel. Actually, no, I'm going to have a cup of tea and some biscuits and some Jaffa cakes and some what do I have? I think I have some chocolate too. But I will thank all of you for joining me, whether you were just listening to my voice because, I don't know, maybe it's relaxing, supposedly, some people have told me, for the just as background noise, or you were really listening to what I was saying and, taking in all this history. Which, I wouldn't blame you if you kind of tune out at times. I know, for example, Lancelot does, because it is a lot. There's constantly a lot being thrown at you. And even when I read these books, I feel like I forget half of what I read the next day, and then I remember maybe about 20%. But the more you read of these types of books, the more you just kind of remember. Like, I have another book there that's roughly the same size, maybe a little bit smaller, that deals with 400 to 1200 AD. So specifically the time period that we're reading about now, pretty much. I'm going to take that stretch. And one last one. There we go. Nice and loose. I might stretch my legs and arms later. A little bit more. Actually, you know what I really need to stretch? I really need to stretch my my pecs, my chest, because I can feel that they're quite tight from bench pressing. Still, I think it was Friday that I did it, but they're still just a little bit tight. So I'm going to stretch those out later. Ugh. It's always nice stretching your chest after like a chest workout. It's just a nice feeling, I feel. It's not like with legs where you're stumbling down the stairs, questioning why you did those squats. What time is it? Okay, I do unfortunately have to go because I have to be up quite early tomorrow. I have to do the thing that everyone else has to do and go slave in the wage cage. But I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. We're gonna see if there's someone to raid into a little sleep. Yeah, I mean, I'll get enough sleep. I'll get enough sleep. My body's well used to not having enough sleep. I'm sure it's gonna catch up to me when I'm like 50 or 60 thousand. Because that's how long like 2 a day can live. But I'm a half 2 a day, so maybe like 30,000. But like that, I could get hit by like a car. Rapid aging, yeah. I'm gonna I don't sleep for like. It's gonna be like Ungus, or not Ungus, sorry, O'Sheen when he steps off the horse in Tirnanog. In Ireland after living in Tirnanog, and he instantly like ages 300 years. It's gonna be like that with me, but it's gonna be like a couple thousand years for me. So I'm gonna turn into like just a prune. I'm just gonna be like I'm gonna be dust. You're gonna be talking to me. We're gonna be walking along, and then you're gonna look, and you're just gonna see dust on the wind, and be like, "Oh no, woo." It was lovely sitting at your campfire. Don't get off the horse. I won't. I'll stay. Hang on. I'll make sure I'm in the trees. Hang on. There we go. I'm hanging by one hand. I gotta keep that immersion. I'm hanging by the trees. I won't touch the ground. Don't worry. But thank you, Crespian. Thank you, Impeach. Thank you, Witty. Thank you, Lancelot, and everyone else who joined today. Remain on your high horse. I'm always on my high horse, Crespian. I am regularly judging everyone because I am morally correct. Is anyone doing ASMR that I can raid into? Xruko Kodo is not doing ASMR. Oh god, no, that person has way too many viewers. Hang on, I'm gonna come down from the tree. Don't worry, I'm like floating above the ground. I can also float. That's one of my other powers as a 2 a day. Just like an inch off the floor. That's way too many viewers to raid into. That's scary. Is there anyone doing... No, those don't look like real ASMR channels. Sometimes you can kind of just tell, you know? Same category. What's this person doing? Hollow crystal. Sorry, I'm just listening to what they're doing. I don't want to send you guys into Manny reads a graphic novel. Wait, what? What's that? I don't get that. A graphic novel. But I don't want to send you guys into something that's a little bit lewd, you know. Okay, I'm never clicking that similar or smaller size channel filter again. That made me feel sad. There was like one other channel. No, not the horny VTuber ASMR. Not the yandere femboy uses his dummy voice ASMR. No. You guys can go watch that if you want, but we're not really into that. I don't think there's anyone necessarily on right now for me to raid. It seems to be mostly... Ooh, there's horror games soft spoken. Morachi. Ooh, she's a very nice model. Okay, we're gonna raid into this person, Morachi. Morachi _ horror game soft spoken. Oh god, this... Okay, I'm gonna give a little warning. It looks a little bit graphic on the screen right now. It's black and white, but it is a teensy bit graphic. So if you guys don't like that, I would stick away from that. But thank you all for joining. Take care. Take care as well, Crespian. Thank you always for always showing up. Very much appreciated. Gered Mila Mahagat and Songafoil, and I will see you guys next stream. That's it.